Afternoon and welcome. My name is Carol Tink, and I am the Director of Innovation, Energy, and Technology. To be your host, we appreciate you taking the time to learn about our energy and sustainability framework and the city's climate goals. Ideally, we would have offered this session in person. However, to ensure we all continue to stay safe, we've selected a virtual platform. And our session today will be recorded. Regina's Energy and Sustainability Framework will identify a community-wide plan and will outline the steps we need to take over the next 30 years to transition to renewable energy sources, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and adopt sustainable net zero practices at all levels of the community. Early this year, Sustainability Solutions Group was selected as the consultant to help us develop a community-wide framework and action plan. SSG developed the widely accepted energy and sustainability planning process that is used across Canada. The city is following this approach to develop its energy and sustainability framework, which includes a parallel public engagement process. SSG is dedicated to helping local governments meaningfully respond to climate change. They're the leading city-scale climate action planning firm in Canada, having completed plans for more than 60 municipalities representing over 40% of Canada's population, ranging from small coastal towns to large metropolitan areas. Their approach reflects the unique context of each community, and they have extensive experience working with cities similar to Regina. SSG has already begun work on the development of the Energy and Sustainability Framework and Action Plan for Regina to become 100% renewable by 2050. Today, they will provide a presentation on the framework development and how Regina will achieve our community goals. Let's get started by introducing you to the members of the team who are joining us today. First, I'll introduce Ryan Gray, who's a corporate strategy and performance consultant, and he's standing in for Greg Kuntz, Manager of Energy and Sustainability Solutions, who is tied up at the City Council meeting currently. Next up from Sustainability Solutions Group, Jeremy Murphy, who's the principal on the project. And Terry Sidhu, project consultant from SSG. And with that, I will hand it over to Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Carol. And thanks for joining us today, everyone. We're happy to be working on the Energy and Sustainability Framework with the City of Regina. It's a very exciting project, we think, and we think that there's lots of great opportunities and innovation that we can determine through the course of this project to take some climate actions locally. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I want to welcome you here and go over four main objectives. We'll kind of get everybody on the same page with providing a general understanding of climate science and how that is giving us impetus to take some action. We'll provide a bit of an understanding of how Regina and the prairies is expected to be affected by climate change. We'll provide some background on the climate action planning that can be done by cities and why that's important. And we will go over some of the objectives of the city's new climate initiative and indicate how you can participate in that. So just to give us all a quick refresher on why we're here, it's the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect, very important to life on Earth, of course. If we didn't have it, it would be freezing cold here. The sun warms the Earth, and all life needs that. And so a lot of the energy from the sun that enters the Earth's atmosphere, it hits the Earth, it reflects off mostly shiny parts of the Earth like the ocean or big lakes or the glaciers or ice, and is reflected back into space. Some of it escapes back into space, and some of the energy is trapped by greenhouse gases. And there are a few different greenhouse gases, as we know, and it's beneficial to have them as this kind of blanket that warms the Earth. The problem occurs when the blanket of greenhouse gases is too thick and too potent, and more of the energy from the sun that is supposed to be radiated back out into space gets trapped. And the trapping of that energy is what creates global heating. And so that is what we're experiencing now, what we've seen over the past several decades, the burning of fossil fuels, increasing the greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, thickening that blanket, and contributing to global heating at an ever accelerating rate. And this is the data. Here's the data that we have on that. So on the left-hand side of this graph, we have the mean temperature over the past 140 years, mean global temperature. And then on the right-hand side of the graph, we have the parts per million of carbon dioxide equivalent concentration in Earth's atmosphere. And so you can see that the orange line increasing over time since 1880 to present day, escalating as time goes on, and indicating that the world's average global temperature has increased by about 1 degree, a little more than 1 degree over that time period. And it's increasing more quickly more recently. And we see from the blue line on the graph that it is in direct correlation with the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So, we had a safe concentration back in the late 1800s, under 300 parts per million. We reached 350 parts per million a couple decades ago, which was still kind of safe. But then we exceeded that 350 parts per million, and now in 2021, we're at about 420 parts per million. So what that tells us is the concentration of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is getting dangerously high, and temperatures are increasing in accordance with that concentration. So what does this mean for the prairies and Regina? Even locally, so the local records in Regina indicate that over the past 100 years, the average temperature in Regina has increased by 1 degree, which doesn't sound like that much. What's 1 degree on any given day? But 1 degree average over the course of the yearly temperature is a significant increase. And if that trend continues, we can expect some pretty intense weather effects to happen. So by the end of this century, if that trend increases, we can expect double the number of days that are over 25 degrees. We can expect some areas receiving these long dry periods, these periods of drought, and at other times they'll get these long, intense rain periods. So instead of having this balance of kind of dry periods and rainy periods that are kind of metered out over the year, they'll be more intense and they'll be more severe and they'll be kind of shorter term, but more variable. And so that increases flood risk, it increases forest fire risk when the drought season is on. It has greater freeze-thaw variations, so the infrastructure is more greatly affected. You can think of it in terms of how many potholes we'll have with greater freeze-thaw cycles happening in rapid succession. And so it's basically going to be wetter during the wet periods, warmer and drier during the dry periods, and wilder. The weather events, there'll be more storms and they'll be more intense, and there'll be more impact on our infrastructure. And also on our way of lives and our health and our well-being. People who have respiratory diseases, or the elderly, or youth, or the homeless, or People who are live in poorer conditions will be more greatly impacted by these changes in climate and the warmer, wetter, and wilder weather that we're expecting. So these climate extremes are kind of what's coming on this trajectory, and that's what we want to desperately avoid. So we know the path that we're going on. We had this this history of increased emissions over the last 150 years or so, and we know that if we keep increasing them, we're on the way beyond the 1 degree warming we've seen over the past 100 years or so. We're on our way to 4 or 5 degree warming. And that gets beyond, like well beyond human adaptability to that environment, the environment that will bring. So we know, of course, we have to get away from fossil fuel use. We have to switch our energy systems. We have to be more energy efficient. And we have to do it in a manner that limits that warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum. 1.5 degrees is the limit. Beyond that limit, it gets dangerous for ecosystems. It gets dangerous for human life. And so just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here in terms of volumes of emissions, we have this diagram of a sphere of carbon dioxide equivalent on the next slide here. And so this is it. This is 1 ton. We're always talking about tons of carbon dioxide. This is a ton of carbon dioxide. It is a sphere that is 2 stories high. That's a lot. It's a giant sphere. And we're talking about millions of these for Regina. So Regina puts out millions of these every year. Millions of these spheres. Just, you can picture them in a big giant pile covering the entirety of Regina. So this is the challenge. It's reducing tons and tons and tons and millions of tons of carbon dioxide and its equivalents. And to give you an idea of what that looks like in kind of other maybe more tangible metrics, for the size of Regina, about 200 to 300,000 residents. A city that size emits about 1 to 5 megatons of carbon dioxide every year. And that is equivalent to burning about 2.3 million barrels of oil. Right, that has a lot of fossil fuels. It's equivalent to taking approximately 300,000 vehicles off the road. That's all the vehicles in Regina, and just stop driving, essentially. Or the amount of carbon that could be sequestered by 1.2 million acres of forest, which is a sizable amount of trees, 22 times the size of Regina. So it's a lot. It's a lot. The challenge is great, but I think so are the opportunities. And I'll hand it over to Terry to talk about some of those.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, Jeremy kind of spelled out this challenge, so I might get to talk to some of the nicer things, including the opportunity that we have in combating climate change and what this could mean for the jurisdiction of Regina. Starting off with global leadership, it's been shown that cities that are leading the efforts to combat climate change are getting global recognition, and since they're sending out constant signals, businesses of different types are investing in them because it's more of a secure asset, and also because of the recognition that they could also be a part of. So with continued calls and efforts towards the climate transition, more and more companies and investments will be present in any community that's taking on the opportunity of climate mitigation. Economic development and reduced community expenditures are also an opportunity. There's an emerging green sector within Canada and North America. We're getting more and more calls from the United States under the Biden administration as well. This does include new technology deployment, including renewable energy, passive house construction, vehicle technologies, and also new systems maintenance. Households and businesses will also save money because they'll have more efficient homes and better systems to work with. Avoiding climate-related damages and their costs is also an opportunity. Forest fires, droughts, floods all have impacts on the built environment, on our homes and our businesses, and avoiding these damages is definitely a benefit of taking climate action. The preservation of natural resources and protection of species is also an opportunity for us. Ensuring that our water systems to begin with are clean provides good quality drinking water for us, and preservation of species that use that water. Addressing things such as droughts can also be a benefit to the farming community within the prairies in Saskatchewan. Pests that do affect farming, trees, and forests can also be mitigated, their effects, if we take climate action. There's an increased opportunity for community equity, as Jeremy pointed to. The global south, as well as the poor people and marginalized communities within Saskatchewan, Regina, and Canada are going to face the brunt of a lot of the effects of climate change in the near term. Ensuring that there's careful planning to include community equity within any of our initiatives is an opportunity to bridge gaps. Compact, well-planned communities with transit that will allow greater opportunity for all of our residents to participate in the economy as well as in civic life. I think the final comment here for our opportunities, improved health outcomes, better air quality for all residents is a critical piece of this opportunity, more access to nature and more opportunities to exercise in our community through cycling, walking, or even taking transit by walking there. This is an opportunity for taking on climate action. Let's consider the pivotal role of cities in this transition. FCM, or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, estimates that local governments, cities, have direct control or influence over about 50% of Canadian emissions, according to a 2009 study. Cities in particular have a critical role in tackling climate change. Their policy directions and decisions have a more impactful scale on residents and cities in a quicker timeline than any other level of government present, such as a provincial or federal. You can think to the measures and actions taken through COVID-19 as one example of such an initiative. Cities more and more are investing and using their tools and powers to take on climate action. This includes changes within the zoning bylaw to improve building performance. This includes greater investment and seed funding for new green ventures such as renewable energy, as well as other technologies. And it also helps other businesses move or transition to this investment. Let's think about what else we need to do. To start off, I think what we really need to realize is that we need to shift to, in the short term and over the next 30 years, more and cleaner electricity. C40 Cities is a lead researcher within the world, and suggests that transitioning from coal to natural gas as one pathway will not avoid the move towards catastrophic climate change, and cities that choose to do this will remain emitting as much as 2.5 more emissions than jurisdictions that have clean electricity. We need to push to zero carbon electricity from renewables, which continue to show more applicability and promise within the Canadian jurisdiction. Consider this, that energy from new renewable energy sources has become the cheapest source of new power globally as of 2019. It has outpaced any new source of energy generation. Also, it's worth considering that the federal government has updated their climate initiatives and will reduce emissions by as much as 40% by 2030. Sask Power, the power agency in Saskatchewan, has also answered this call and is targeting an emissions reduction from their generation by 50% by 2030. Zero carbon buildings need to become more important in our future. This is for existing buildings, and this is for future buildings as well. A zero carbon building consists of a highly energy efficient, airtight building using low carbon sources for space heating and water heating. This is increasingly available using both electric air source and ground source heat pumps, which is pictured on the left here. district systems, and renewable natural gas where possible. Passive house is a leading standard that for new buildings, as well as it can be targeted for retrofits that maximizes solar and heating gain from the sun and can lower energy demand from anywhere from 50 to 90% from a standard code home. Low carbon transportation is also important. We know that we can generate more and more clean electricity, and we can use that clean electricity to help us move around. We need to convert our cars, buses, trains, and other modes of transport from fossil fuels to running on clean electricity. Electric vehicles in particular are getting better and better and cheaper every year. Battery capacity and range is growing, and there are more places within our cities to charge them. EVs are just more simple to maintain from a consumer point of view. Often the maintenance costs decrease dramatically, and it's just a matter of changing the tires through seasons. With transportation, we need to consider a pathway that reduces consumption to begin with, improves it, and then switches possible. So improving our access to active transportation and creating great infrastructure that invites residents to take part in walking and cycling is critical. Even in winter climates, where I am in Montreal, for example, if you build good infrastructure, people will use it to cycle year round. And just a note on climate action planning as we ramp up efforts in Regina's energy and sustainability framework. Climate action planning often used to mean things about purely electricity and perhaps renewable or natural spaces, but actually in today's context involves more elements which are pictured in this infographic on the screen. It includes things like land use planning and having careful energy and emissions guidelines with that in our engineering and infrastructure decisions and investments, considering how we can shift economic development priorities towards sustainable ventures, dealing with transit authorities and how they interact with road space, as well as vehicle traffic, considering the equity component that both myself and Jeremy have talked to in this presentation, and also working with energy utilities. The big idea in climate action planning is how to reduce consumption in all of our activities, whether this is heating our homes to how we get around, increasing energy efficiency by choosing better technology, such as electric heat pumps, as well as electric vehicles, and shifting entirely from fossil fuels to clean electricity. We need to apply this to all of our sectors, including transportation and buildings and electricity. So I'm going to pass this off, I believe, to Ryan, who will talk about Regina's energy and sustainability framework and the principles that it's starting off with.
Thanks, Terry, and also thanks, Jeremy, before. We're all really excited here at City of Regina to be working with SSG on this important initiative. As Terry said, about our own framework, our energy and sustainability framework has the following objectives. The first step in what we're working on right now is an up-to-date greenhouse gas inventory for city operations and also for the entire community. The next step will be working to align this framework with the federal and provincial climate initiatives so that we can meet future regulations and take advantage of funding opportunities. This transition will present the city and surrounding area with significant economic opportunities, and we want to be sure we seize these opportunities as they become available. We also will be creating a public engagement process as an important part of developing the framework, and we want to make sure that this plan is accepted by the community. As most of you are aware, climate action benefits more than just the environment. There are significant financial and social benefits to this work. As with most of this municipal action, we require policies to enact this work and to ensure a systematic approach to implementation. So really, we'll be making sure that the federal and provincial initiatives align with what we're doing and create a local emissions pathway that resonates with the community so we can take advantage of funding opportunities from all levels and also improve our economy and our way of life. So we want to hear from you, and we encourage all of you to visit beheard.regina.ca for more information about how to be involved in Regina's energy and sustainability framework. There are lots of opportunities for input and to share your ideas.
All right. I would like to thank everyone for participating today, our attendees and our presenters. Really appreciate the good discussion. As I mentioned earlier, we have recorded this session, and so the recording will be available on our Be Heard Regina page. And I encourage you to visit the site, join the conversation, and get updates on the energy and sustainability framework. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great afternoon.